That would be.
Okay, we'll get started. Welcome everybody to City Council, February 18th, 2020. Thanks for joining us at City Hall and online or on Channel 17. We appreciate everyone being involved. We'll get started tonight with a prayer, inspirational message from Junior Baker, and then asked Councilman Gordon to lead us in the pledge.
Our Father in heaven, as we come before Thee this evening, we give Thee thanks for the freedoms of this great land, for the beauties of this city, for the careful decisions that have been made in our past. We pray for Thy discerning spirit to be upon our council members this evening. They might review and make those decisions which will continue the betterment of our community. We pray that we might avoid contention, that we might respect one another's views, and be able to voice them honestly, be able to make decisions which will be for our good. We ask Thee to watch over our community, bless that it might prosper. This we pray in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thanks, Junior.
Would the audience please rise? Please repeat the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may be seated.
Okay, item number 4 is public comments. Anybody that's here to address the City Council, public comments. This is separate from the public hearing. That's item number 7. But if there's anybody in the public that would like to address the council, you're more than welcome to. Okay, seeing none, we'll move. Before I move to consent items, it should be noted, and it's obvious that we're missing a team member here today. Mayor Leifson is out of town. We'll be back next council meeting. Brandon promised to not mess it up while he's gone. We'll see if he keeps that promise. But we wish Mayor and Cheryl a good time until they get back. So item number 6, consent item. What's that? Oh, excuse me. We're not going to skip 5. See, the mayor would already be disappointed. That's right. That's right. Let's go to council comments. We'll start with Council Member Beck first for council comments.
I do not have anything tonight.
Nothing.
Nothing.
Okay. Councilman Scobes.
Ditto.
Councilman Gordon.
Just want to say congratulations to the national champs Spanish Fork High School cheerleading team. They won nationals down at Disneyland over the weekend, so I was very proud. I've got a niece on the team, so last night we were able to welcome the bus back to the high school where they were able to ring the bell. And I did look at the principal, and being the sort of insurance agent, risk control guy, said we need to have a safer way for them to get to the top of the bell. He acknowledged that, just so all you guys that give me grief about being the risk control manager, self-described.
Can't they do it stand?
They did. They got up there. They got up there. But anyway, I was very, very proud of them. Very excited to see the school bus come down Main Street honking. And well, they got the fire truck when they won state, and so I guess we give it to them again. We got to clear that through Councilman Mendenhall. He's in charge of fire engines. He'll let us know. But we're hoping that they can have an opportunity to come to council meeting where we can shake all their hands. And then tomorrow night we have a banquet with our volunteers from the fire department and our, I'm sorry? Part-time. We got to call them part-time. But I'll go rogue and say many of them have been volunteers and they volunteer so much of their time. And I only bring that up because it'll be great to rub shoulders with these people. These people have built a fire crew and an ambulance crew in this community that we have all benefited from, every resident in this town. And these are people that live amongst us, and they take care of us. And the reason that's important to me, and the reason I kind of wanted to get on a little bit of a soapbox here tonight, was because my brother-in-law lives in a town up north, and he is a full-time paramedic in another community, and I often hear him just with a little bit of angst say, "I'm going to work," and he even says, "I can't wait till I can retire. I can't wait." And I talk to some of our 30 plus year men and women who have ran on our fire and ambulance, and they're our neighbors, and they help keep us safe and protect us, and they're just the neatest part of what makes Spanish Fork great. And so I just wanted to share that. It'll be an honor to be with all those wonderful part-time fire and ambulance people tomorrow night. So appreciated that, and that's all I have, Mike.
Thank you. Councilman Argyle?
I don't have anything tonight.
A couple things on my list. Number one, went and spoke to the Utah County Association of Realtors last week. Appreciate the information that was shared to be able to give to them. Very good feedback from those professionals that work in the home selling, home building world, and excited about Spanish Fork and South Utah County as a whole, and we're thankful for the information that was provided. Thanks, Dave, from the Economic Development Office, for getting me that information to be able to share with them. Had a Rotary meeting today. Again, appreciate Scott, our Public Information Officer, coming and giving the Rotary Club an update on the All Abilities Park. Very, very good stuff for these men and women in the community that are involved in things and like to volunteer and like to give back, to see something so neat as that going to be built in our community. So it was announced in Rotary meeting today that it's official, but they did get approval to donate some funds from our Rotary District Club that will be in addition to the donated funds that are obviously already received for the All Abilities Park. So very neat stuff, and excited to see that grow. I don't see Heather from the Chamber of Commerce, but I know they've had some events this last week with some ribbon cuttings, business of the month, but we'll get an update from her next time. Lastly, I know we'll have a couple more meetings still with our City Attorney Junior Baker here, but him coming up and offering the invocation was something that kind of struck me as a staple of the legal department in Spanish Fork, but obviously respected around the state as well. And I know we'll be able to say a lot more about Junior in the coming weeks, but what a great asset he's been to the city of Spanish Fork. And that's all I have. Let's move to number 6, consent items.
Motion to approve the consent items.
Second?
Motion by Councilman Gordon, second by Councilman Argyle to approve the consent items. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, item number 7, public hearing. Item A, this is tabled from February 4th, 2020. Ordinance Z01-20, changing the zoning designation and amending the official zoning map of Spanish Fork City for the Ludlow Development Enhancement Zone change. Dave Anderson.
Thank you, Councilman. I'm going to try to be as simple as I can in describing this. I hope I don't oversimplify. Please ask any questions that you have as I describe what I think the most relevant issues are. I think most of you, if not all of you, will recall when the zoning was changed on this property. It's on the northeast corner of First South and First East, just kind of across the way from us here on the other side of City Park. It was changed to residential office in order to accommodate potentially some type of really office use, some kind of non-residential use in the structure. Since that time, a business has moved into the building there. They've been operating now for maybe close to a year. And we've been working with the property owners for the past several months to try to get to the point where the site can be found to meet the city's basic requirements so that we can issue a business license for them. You might recall we had some discussion with you several months ago about this, and we certainly appreciate the guidance that you gave us then. Specifically before you tonight is a proposal to use a tool that, in all candor, I don't think was really designed for the purpose that we're going to ask you to consider tonight. That being said, I do think it's the best tool that we have at our disposal. to try to accommodate the business that, again, they've been operating there now for several months, such that we could issue a business license for them without having the site developed in such a way that it meets our basic requirements for non-residential uses. The biggest of those would involve the development of a parking lot in this area right here. That was something that was contemplated when the zoning was changed. In fact, the property owners provided a concept plan that showed that, an off-street parking lot with a number of parking spaces that correlated to the size of the building and what would be required if, for example, the building were converted to an office use. Also, we would require any place that the subject property abuts a residential use, that a 6-foot wall be constructed. And those are the two things that we ask that you consider approving the development enhancement overlay in order to permit the city to issue a business license for this property without building that off-street parking lot and constructing the masonry wall along the northern boundary of the property there. Those two things.
Around the
Yeah.
southern boundary, northern boundary, okay.
Northern, yes. I don't want to speak for anybody but myself, but I feel particularly comfortable with this proposal for really two reasons. The business that is located there now seems to generate very little need for off-street parking. The most fundamental requirement, and frankly I think the most typical complaint that we get about sites that have been adapted for a non-residential use, homes that are converted and such, or even just commercial sites that are located in close proximity to homes, typically they have to do with there being inadequate off-street parking. I've said this, I'll say it again, I really think the business that's here now, it might be 1 in a million, where I've been told and I've observed that they typically don't have more than 2 or 3 vehicles parked in an area, either in parking spaces that they have just a driveway here or along the street. And therefore, they really don't seem to generate an impact. In fact, it was that observation in part that led to a proposal that you considered and approved in your last meeting to change some of the verbiage in the development enhancement overlay so that that overlay just runs from one business to the end of its lifespan at a particular property. So to explain a little bit more about how that would apply in this case right now, if you were to approve the development enhancement overlay, if we were to grant a business license for the business to be there, then that basically approval would be valid as long as that particular business is operating on that site. But let's say then that that business leaves, and of course at some point in the future they will. At that point in time, the exceptions to the rules, maybe we could say, that we would have approved as the council, and the opportunity that the property owner would have to have another business locate on this property without satisfying all of the city's standard requirements, that would go away. So at that point in time, the property owner they'd have several options. I'll mention 2 of them. They would have the option to simply develop the site if they wanted, for example, to put, let's say, a realtor's office here. And they simply would have to develop off-street parking to satisfy our requirements for off-street parking for that particular use. Or they could, again, petition the city for the development enhancement overlay for a different business, a particular business. And you ultimately, as the council, or whoever might be in your place, if that were to happen in the future, would have the opportunity to make a decision as to whether or not that's justified, makes sense, and, you know, frankly, the way that the enhancement overlay is utilized as a zoning tool, the council at that time would have considerable discretion to say yes or no, like you have tonight. You're under absolutely no obligation to approve this, and it would be the same in the future. Does that make sense? So we're just talking about this particular business and their, again, lifespan on the property. That's something that, like I said, make us as staff feel comfortable supporting. And also, we think that the opinions of those who might be the most impacted matter quite a bit. And I can't speak for everybody, so I want to be clear that I'm not trying to do that. But we have corresponded with the neighbors, and it's my understanding that the current property owner of this property here, who was not the owner of the property when the zoning was changed, but that they would simply prefer to not have the masonry wall requirement enforced along their boundary here, and to not have the parking area constructed there. So those are the two things that I think have led us as staff, as much as anything, to feel comfortable going this direction. Again, I'll readily admit that I think it's a stretch to use the development enhancement overlay in this fashion, but particularly with that that provision that it's tied just to the business. It certainly makes us feel a lot more comfortable with this approach, and it seems like maybe a way to I don't want to say split the baby, but you know, maybe some way to cooperate to come to a result that might be amenable for different parties that have a stake in the situation in different ways. So this comes to you with a recommendation from both the Development Review Committee and the Planning Commission for approval.
So this business is here, this overlay stays, business moves, it goes back to, zoning stays the same, essentially, RO.
Residential office.
Okay. So then if they change the next business that comes in, are they going to come back to us and want another overlay?
Well,
And or they could go ahead and conduct the wall and do the parking lot?
yes. So I would. This is how it should work. Before another business starts operating on the property, a business license should be issued for the property. And before we would issue a business license for the property, we would have to confirm that the property meets the city's requirements for that business at that location. Parking would be the issue. Might not be the only issue, probably would be the most significant. Frankly, I think that in order to use the property non-residentially, either improvements would have to be made, or like you're saying, they would have to go back through that process. There'd be a public hearing, public notice, and different things like that to get to this point for the enhancement overlay. Or they could use the property residentially, and the discussion would be very different. We wouldn't require off-street parking, for example, different things like that. That hasn't been, I would say, a significant decision driver for staff, but relative to having additional investment made for a non-residential use there, I do think that might be worth considering as well. That, you know, that also could be a part of the property's future in terms of just being used residentially, and then the masonry wall and the parking would be requirements.
Okay.
And Dave, did you say that the business has been operating for a year without a business license? Do we know?
Our attention in May, and I had understood
Okay.
that it probably was operating for a month or two at least before that. So,
Okay.
so we've been corresponding for quite some time to try to get this taken care of.
Okay. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks, Dave. We'll open it up for public
Motion to
Public
go into
hearing.
public hearing.
Second?
motion by Councilman Gordon, second by Councilman Argyle to go into public hearing for this issue. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, perfect. Public hearing, if you're here to speak about this issue, try to keep it to 3 minutes if possible, but anybody that's here that wants to speak to the council about this issue? Perfect. Just your name, rank, and serial number. Not that really, but just your name.
Hi, everybody. My name's Brian Fay. I actually own the property just to the north there, so the wall concerns me in particular. So they've been operating the business for a little while now. I have to tell you, the most beautiful thing about that property is it's next to the park. So there's people parked on the street all day long. I don't notice the 2 cars there. They don't bother me. I have more problem getting into my parking on Friday night when the food trucks are there than I ever do with this business. So they're quiet, they're respectful, we have no issues with them at all. Unfortunately, I have the dubious honor of owning the tiniest property on the entire city block, which means the property line ends 9 inches off the south side of my driveway. Were you to build a wall there, I wouldn't be able to open the car door. Somebody suggested, well, if we move it back, move it south a few feet. And I said, well, there's a door on a fence back here where kids are coming through all day long. You would actually create an alleyway there that would fill up with trash, blowing in there. Kids, hopefully they wouldn't be back there doing whatever, but I actually think enhancing the property and putting a wall there would actually not only make me unhappy because I love opening my door and being open and beautiful, but I actually think it might cause some other unforeseen circumstances maybe that we're not even thinking about. But as far as the businesses there is concerned, it's because we're next to a park, it really is. I don't even know those people are there. They're silent. I get more problems from my neighbors on the other side, and they're silent too. So anyway, I have been against the wall in the parking lot the whole time, and I think I'm really the only neighbor, maybe besides the one on the east side here. There's already a masonry wall there, I think 4 or 5 feet tall. So we're really the only ones butting up against the property. And we're fine with the way it is. Anyway, I thought I'd come and throw my 2 cents in. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks for coming. Appreciate it. Anyone else here to speak to the council about this issue? Okay. If not, I entertain a motion to go out of public hearing.
So moved.
Second?
Motion by Council Member Beck, seconded by Council Member Gordon. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Perfect. Any other questions up here from the council for Dave?
Should be noted the applicant is also here if you want to ask that.
Oh, the applicant's here too. Sorry, I didn't invite you to speak. You're more than welcome to come up as part of public comment if you'd like. Or
If they have any questions of us,
Okay.
I don't feel like I have anything to add, but if you have a specific question that maybe didn't get answered, we're willing to answer it.
Maybe everybody knows.
I'm good.
My question is, what is the business that is here?
It's an internet.
Sorry.
You'll have to come to the microphone, sorry.
No,
Come on up.
Come on.
To the microphone. So
See
that
how they got you to come up?
3 million viewers on YouTube.
Well, we usually sit right there, so we move because we.
Oh, you just saw yourself. All right.
Remind us your name on for the.
Fred Ludlow. The business that's there now is an internet influencing company. They do craft type things, take pictures of it, and they're on Instagram. It's called The House that Lars Built. If anybody wants to look it up, they can look it up. So that's what they do. Little crafty projects and post it and get revenue, get advertising for that. So they do have a few employees, but again, we specifically look for a business like that. And we haven't, it's still a full house. All the bathrooms, kitchen, everything's would still function as a house, and that's our intention to keep it that way.
Do you have a long-term lease with the
3
tenant?
years.
3 years,
So
okay.
3
Options?
years and a couple months.
Do they have options after that?
Currently, no.
Okay.
You're looking to move to Brian's good
No,
neighborhood.
I was asking, for obviously the reason that, if they outgrow it, they grow up, they move out, then a lot of these triggers that we're talking about might make Brian unhappy, and it's really an interesting situation. But for me, ever since we've been discussing this since June or earlier, it's just an opportunity it just seems like it makes sense from my opinion.
And again, that's our intention. We do want to keep it where it could flip back to a regular residential house. And we specifically looked for a business that, you know, wouldn't fill up every square inch of it, so that we wouldn't have to try and convert, you know, take out the bathrooms and things like that.
I'm good.
Great. Thanks, Mr.
While you're there, I do have some questions, if I may. I'm glad that it's working out well for you, the business. It is unfortunate that it's been a business that hasn't had a business license, and that's something that I know staff is working through. The challenge I have is, and I'm looking at representing citizens that have had businesses, that are starting their businesses, and have requirements that are laid out that they have to meet those requirements. Also, businesses that come into our city that have similar requirements that meet those requirements. And so the challenge I have is looking at the requirements that were laid out, the requirements that were agreed upon, the requirements that were proposed initially, and then some of the things that I would love for you to address, or your party to be able to address. I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around some of the questions and concerns. For example, the language in this particular ordinance, the variance that you're looking for, talks about where certain conditions cannot be met. Now, parking is the one that's being referenced. Certainly, physically, it can be met. That was proposed by you in 2015. But some of the things that if you could just help me understand. One, for example, in the letter you sent, it says, literal enforcement of the zoning ordinance would cause an unreasonable hardship for the applicant, being yourselves, that is not necessary to carry out the general purpose of the zoning ordinance. If you could explain that to me, because I fail to understand how it's an unreasonable hardship now, whereas 4 years ago when you proposed it, it was not an unreasonable hardship and was something that you agreed to. In fact, several times mentioning we're going to have 6 stalls or 8 stalls. We're going to have 2 here and 6 over there. So that was something that was initially part of the plan. And so if you could just please explain to me how something you had agreed upon now suddenly is an unreasonable hardship.
So in 2015, at the end of 15, we actually proposed 2 different scenarios, 2 different parking scenarios. Neither one was fully agreed upon. The city had a preference towards one, but it was not decided which one. The other thing that happened was we didn't know what we were going to do with the property. We talked about reducing the size of like the kitchen in order to maximize square footage.
Sure.
So we felt like there was probably an opportunity to be able to rent it for a higher amount if you could convert to more office space. And when we opted to not do that and proceed this way, of course, you know, somebody comes in and looks at it, you look at the square footage, you think, well, this is how much office space we get. And then you come in, you realize there's this full kitchen, a full bath, 2 full baths actually, and so people weren't as interested, which was okay. We were okay with that. We also had the city engineer come out in, I guess it was May, did an audit of it and said, based upon how it was being used, the most that he would say was probably 4 or 5 spaces. So we've never done this before. So
Sure.
We're kind of proceeding. We definitely had a vision that we would prefer not to convert it to maximum space. We wanted to keep it as a residence, knowing that we would, you know, have a minimal number of employees would be able to office there. So in 2015, there were at least 2 different options on parking, and we said we'll do something. Here's 2 options that we have right now, and neither one was fully agreed upon. The city did say, hey, we have a preference. We said, well, we'll keep moving forward. So during 16, 17, and 18, we continued to make some improvements on the property. We have family here, so we used it kind of as a second home. And when we had the exterior improvements and just some mechanical issues with the house repaired, that's when we moved forward. And when we looked at it, the traffic pattern is, I mean, we've owned the house for, is it 12 years? And so we've had probably 4 or 5 different families in there. I think it gets used less now than any time we've had other families, because typically a house that size, it usually had a couple of teenagers. So we looked at it and said, well, we're really generating less traffic than we would if it was a single-family house.
Sure.
And our neighbors around us, when we talked to people, nobody wanted parking. They felt like, you know, as we told people we owned the house, I mean, people really don't want it changed. And so it's right across from the park, so we shifted what we wanted to do, and we specifically went out and found a tenant that would fit the bill.
Thank you. And please know, I'm not coming at this in any type of adversarial position. Before I vote, I need to be able to wrap my head around it. And where I'm coming from is ordinances and requirements. As you mentioned, your requirements for parking have changed, but nonetheless, the zoning that you had requested has a set requirement for off-street parking, whether it's 5, 3, 8, you know, whichever. And so I'm looking at trying to find that balance of something that fits in the neighborhood, something that works in a zone that was approved, and then trying to make that fit into a system where government can find things that work for everyone, but also isn't preferential in different decisions, because there are many others that have the residential office requirement and have met regardless of the surroundings of the neighborhood. And so the questions that I am proposing, please, are not adversarial, or simply so that I understand and can be better informed myself before I vote. So
no, absolutely. You know, when we saw how this was playing out, that's where I went back and looked at the city ordinances, and I saw how you can get an exemption, and that's why I wrote that letter. And then, as I understand from Dave and different people, is really that portion. This overlay is kind of, Dave can answer this better, but I asked why are we using this overlay language instead of this? He said, well, there's been some laws changed at the state level, which I'm of course unaware of, and so I said, well, this is the meaning behind what we're going for. I understand that maybe this method is no longer an avenue, and if this other overlay is an avenue that can accomplish that. But I tried to address those. As I saw it, the city left open a avenue if a logical person can come up with reasons why to grant an exemption.
right.
And so that's what I attempted to do.
No,
As I understand it, that's not really, that path is no longer really open, so this overlay is the new path.
Sure. No, I appreciate that. Now, the next questions I have, and I appreciate your patience and the council for affording me these questions. Some of the things that you had talked about in the letter, there are special circumstances attached to the property that do not generally apply to other properties. You've mentioned just the keeping of the neighborhood and the historic nature of the home. I know that there were neighbors that actually were against the zoning, and so I don't know that they can necessarily be pulled into they wanted to keep the house and the feel of the house. I think they wanted to make sure that it stayed residential and not any commercial office use at all. But that aside, one thing that I am curious about, granting the variance is essential to the enjoyment of a substantial right possessed by other property in the same district. And so I'm curious what property rights would be infringed with the off-street parking that you went in and talked about, how your family loves the park, and the property owners has expressed certainly enjoy the way it is now. Had the off-street parking been built in 2015, I don't know that the phase, I don't remember when you had moved into your home, but that wall may have actually been there prior to them moving in. And so I'm just curious what you're referring to as far as the property right that would be infringed based on, or granting the variance would keep that being infringed.
What I was going for there was how we currently use it and how currently the look and feel is, it look and feels like a residential house. And it is right across the street from the park. So, you know, during the 24th of July parade, we have people that park out on the grass. Of course, they could if it was a parking lot, but then it'd be 20 degrees hotter. So we have people that, and we don't know them, they just, I know the strip is open to anybody, but we just have people camp out. Not camp out, but use it.
Sure.
And so we also have people, and we let our tenants know, you'll have people just come over and sit in the shade. They'll just come over from the park and sit. And our tenants through the years have, every time anybody's moved in, I've told them, hey, you're across the street from the park. That's a blessing and also sometimes a little bit of a burden, because people just kind of will come and hang out. And, you know, if somebody's bothering you, you know, have them move along or whatever. But that's what I was talking about is, in general, that neighborhood just enjoys, it's a big piece of grass that's right across the street from the park. It keeps it cooler. There's shade trees and people just hang out.
Let's see. No, I appreciate that. Now the variance, another comment you had made, the variance will not substantially affect the general plan and will not be contrary to the public interest. Again, it's been mentioned, and appreciate the fact that the facility still has that look of a home, although currently it is not, and is zoned not to be in said fashion. The variance won't affect the general plan because it is zoned, spot zoned for its use. The contrary to the public interest, if you could, and maybe this is part of where I'm getting hung up, is the public interest. As citizens, we need to be able to rely on our ordinances. And if the ordinance says there are certain requirements, then the requirements need to be met. And there's variances you had mentioned and things where perhaps 8 stalls isn't what's necessary. It may be 4, it may be 3, 2 that you have there to the south already outside the garage. And so that's the struggle I have, and appreciate your comments in, you have mentioned substantial justice being done and that this variance wouldn't be contrary to the public interest. Many of us as citizens, we enter into different agreements, and unfortunately, if we don't fulfill with our part of the agreements, we are either taken to collections, or we lose our lease, or we're kicked out of our apartments, or things like that. And so I'm just curious if you could just explain to me your thoughts and feelings of the justice that would take place and how that's not contrary to the public interest for you to receive a variance on a requirement that you had agreed upon, whereas any other business or citizen that would enter into that would be held to that type of standard.
Sure. Well, currently, we have left the house as is, so it could revert back to, it is zoned to be a residence, and we purposely wanted to keep it that way, where it could sell or it could be a home, and people would feel comfortable there. They wouldn't have to tear out office space to create a new bathroom or whatnot. So it is set up to be a residence, and who knows, maybe that's what the next best use will be. So there was language in the ordinances to give an exception, and that's why we're here today. Is laws are black and white, and where people want to give themselves wiggle room, it's good that there is some language for wiggle room, so that somebody can say, hey, there's something that's a little bit unique about this property.
Microphone.
I don't know. So,
as the mayor mentions, there are 3.2 million people watching. So,
that's where we appealed to. That was this is a unique property. It's right across the street from the park. I mean, if you talk to people, I talk to people that have just moved to Spanish Fork or visited Spanish Fork. They just know the house. Everybody knows the Career House. and it looks and feels like a house, and it looks and feels like it has for the last, 80 years. It was built in 1894, 92, 1892. And so rather than take up all this yard and put in a fence that will suddenly change the feel of it and make it feel like it's not part of the neighborhood, if we get the right kind of tenant in there, and I do agree, when we did this zoning request in 2015, the biggest concern was, just straight down First East is, I don't know what it's called now. I call it, when I lived here, it was Johnny's. And that was the concern, really. Our neighbors, when they came in here, that was the concern. And they're like, there's going to be cars backed up. It's going to be this, and said no. That's not going to be allowed. That was really the concern, and that's. I think during that meeting we had probably 4 or 5 neighbors come in, and a couple spoke against it, and a couple spoke for, and here we are 5 years later, and we have gave them 2 shots, actually 3 shots, because there was a zoning meeting, and then the meeting. We appreciate you. By the way, thank you for giving us a continuance. We were in Denver, and we were getting that big snowstorm, so thank you. But this time around, we have one neighbor who comes in, and they don't want it. They don't want it. They don't want parking there. So I don't know if that answered your question.
I not exactly, but
Okay.
But I'm able to extrapolate.
To your point, rules are there to follow, and where a city or any organization wants to leave themselves some latitude for consideration for a specific point, they give themselves that, and the city did give themselves that. And as I understand it, that particular language maybe isn't applicable, but the city wants to retain some right to listen to a particular petition and evaluate it on its merits, and then make an exception to the rule. And that's where I appeal. That's where we appeal to.
No, I appreciate it. And then lastly, you've been on the hot seat long enough, so again, I thank you for your time and your patience. I know, and Dave's back in the back. So Dave, if you can help Mr. Ludlow with this, or perhaps Mr. Ludlow, you already have this. Part of the development enhancement overlay zone. Part of what can come about, or actually in the language, it's almost a must. It says that adequate conditions have been incorporated into the zone which will offset the easing of usual requirements. So the usual requirements in the RO would be the tens of thousands of dollars, as you mentioned, with the off-street parking. The development enhancement overlay zone requires that adequate conditions have been built into it that will offset some of that easing. In layman's terms, for those that are watching at home, basically so that, and again, I don't mean this adversarially, but just in very layman's terms, so that any developer, any person that builds or has a business doesn't get off scot-free from one requirement that would cost $20, $30, $80, $100,000 moving into the development enhancement overlay zone to avoid spending that amount of money on improvements or what have you. And so that's built into the ordinance, that those conditions are there. Have you addressed, or are there any conditions that you've built into, if it stays this the green space, we'll call it, if it stays green space as it is, what, in addition to the painting and the flower beds, as you mentioned in your letter, what, and I'll use the verbiage, what conditions do you plan to incorporate into this that will offset, basically, so there's, again, layman's terms, I apologize, I don't mean to talk down or sound like I'm talking down anyone, but that you've built into it to basically say, look, we have skin in the game, we recognize we aren't having to pay this much anymore, but this is what we are going to do, and sort of the plan forward. Have you thought of that, or do you have a plan for that at all? Or
the city has addressed that. So there is a block wall fence to the east. It's running somewhere. The requirement is a 6-foot masonry wall, and this wall is probably somewhere around 5 foot. We probably need to add probably two, it's cinder block, we probably need to add 2 layers. So we've agreed to that. And then the additional landscaping. So the big tree would stay, additional trees, that was the biggest thing, then some additional shrubs that would be required to beautify it and just make it a better looking property.
Sure. Now, the drive to the south at the garage,
Yes, yes.
last time I had gone by there, the cement, the entry.
It's a horrible spot, it's in horrible shape.
Yes.
Yeah, so
Is that also part of what you've looked at into incorporating? Is that a condition that can be laid on with this?
Yeah, yes, so this spot right here, where it crosses over the gutter, is in the worst shape. And then the side, so we've said we're gonna replace that spot right there. And then the driveway, we are facing a little bit of a conundrum, I guess I would say. This is an old enough property that was set up for flood irrigation. So everything runs to the house instead of away from the house, which is what you do now. So we've got a decision what to do with that driveway, whether to keep it the same level. The driveway's in pretty decent shape, but we need to do something with that. But definitely right here, that's in horrible, horrible shape. That's falling apart. And so that's going to be done this spring.
Okay.
There's a couple spots. Is the sidewalk the city's or ours?
The sidewalk cities.
So there's a couple of, we've got a walk that runs right here. In addition to this one, we do have a walk that runs right here that we need to address because the roots have caused it to heave up, so we're going to address that. This walk's in pretty good shape. There's a couple of spots. This area right here is in pretty rough shape.
All right, super. Thank you.
Thanks, Fred.
Any
Thank
other
you.
questions or anything? All right, thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Anything else?
I make a motion, we approve ordinance number Z01-20, an ordinance changing the zoning designation and amending the official zoning map of Spanish Fork City for the Ludlow Development Enhancement Zone change.
Second?
A motion by Councilman Gordon, seconded by Councilmember Beck to approve this ordinance and enhancement zone, overlay zone change with a couple of the recommendations that were noted there. We'll do this as a roll call vote. Councilman Argyle?
Aye.
Councilman Gordon?
Aye.
Councilman Mendenhall? Aye. Councilman Scobes?
Aye.
Councilmember Beck?
Aye.
Passes. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Moves us to number 8, new business. Item A, contract with Nebo School District for parking lot improvements at Diamond Fork Junior High. Maybe if I can just really quick, 2 things. Number 1, thanks for the discussion and thanks for that. I think that's what we're constantly, all of us up on the hill, talking about the local control, local issues, local land use, that you can come to some common sense stuff when it makes sense instead of the state maybe taking a heavy-handed approach sometimes. And number 2, I failed to mention in my comments about the All Abilities Park Facebook Live event happening tomorrow. Sorry, Chris, I'm taking away from your time. But tomorrow at 3. Tomorrow at 3, Facebook, follow Spanish Fork City on Facebook if you don't already. Speaking of the millions viewing, there's millions, right, followers? So follow that, and you'll see some exciting things about the All Abilities Park tomorrow at 3, and you'll get to see Scott again, live, right? Perfect. Anybody be with Scott? Will you guys be with Scott?
Dale,
Scott and Dale.
it's a one-on-one Dale and Scott. I'm sure there'll be some people heckling from the studio sides, but
Perfect.
yeah,
Is the link up for the camera?
not
Will be?
yet. It'll be on channel 16.
It's going to happen.
I don't know.
That was a great idea.
Well,
Never
I don't
thought
know
of
how
that.
it is, but,
Be a camera that follows the progress of
Sorry.
the park from construction
Yeah.
on. Yeah.
for sure a time lapse from that, but yeah, we'll figure out that some way. The program that it runs is a little bit challenged, and so having it always there is tough. But we got to figure something out because it's going to be fun to watch.
Thank you. Oh, yep, come on. Scott. Hey,
We'll have a website that will have an image that updates every 5 minutes or so with the static shot of the park. So we'll have the website up and running tomorrow for the Facebook Live so people can see that.
There's excavators and stuff on the site now, right?
They're up working.
Yep.
So fun.
Take my little 3-year-old
No,
Jag. He'll love to watch it.
He doesn't get to drive the
Maybe
equipment.
drive it, yeah.
Nope.
Okay, Chris, sorry about that. Derailed you a little bit.
We have 2 projects going on this summer, one at each of our junior highs. They are the Nebo School District junior highs. They are kind of timely because the junior highs are getting ready to transition to a more of a middle school junior high. And so both of these projects are designed to really help with the traffic in those areas. And so as all these changes occur, hopefully the traffic can change and become better. The first one is on Center Street at the Diamond Fork Junior High, which will eventually become a middle school. And basically what this project does is it widens out Center Street to 5 lanes, all in front of the junior high, and then especially from 1150 east, going east to Highway 6, which is a really high traffic area with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lanes here at the intersection. Anyway, part of this project is to realign a driveway and a road into this subdivision so that they line up with this signalized intersection. And that way we can improve access to this parking lot right here, which is really awkward currently. This parking lot will be expanded and have almost triple the number of parking stalls and be a lot more efficient at how the parking occurs. If people want to come, they'll be able to go straight through the intersection at 1150 East and Center Street, and then be able to come up into this neighborhood or into the parking lot here and be able to exit to a signalized intersection so that they're not waiting a long time if they want to make a left turn. This is a very good idea by Brandon Gordon.
There we go.
Which was studied by many traffic engineers and verified that it was a good idea. So we appreciate the input from the city council on these type of things. That being said, one of the things that the Nebo School District has agreed to do is participate in the cost of the expansion of this parking lot. They've agreed to pay $250,000 towards that expansion, and this is the agreement which will license that.
Great. Thank you, Chris. I had a couple of questions about this today, in fact, so it's good to see it's getting to the point where we're signing contracts and actually going to move some stuff, so pretty cool. Okay, if any other questions for Chris? If not, I'd entertain a motion.
I move that we approve the contract with Nebo School District for parking lot improvements at Diamond Fork Junior High School.
Second. Motion made by Councilmember Beck, seconded by Councilmember Mendenhall to approve the contract with Nebo School District for the parking lot improvements. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Perfect. Item B, resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into a interlocal agreement with Nebo School District to realign streets and parking lots. Same kind of thing here, Chris.
Yeah, very similar. So there's a lot of traffic issues around the other junior high in Spanish Fork. This will remain a junior high with the changes. And a lot of it is directed here on 820 East. You have an awkward offset intersection here at Canyon Road, which is not real efficient, so traffic backs up. Here you have conflict with the buses come in here, and then the parent drop-off is right here, and this is often clogged up. And then this intersection becomes clogged up quite a bit too, with students crossing all the time and then cars trying to get in and doing around to drop off. And so we formed a steering committee made up of parents, school district officials, and city staff from our engineering office, as well as a traffic engineering firm that has done a lot of studies similar to this. And that steering committee and traffic engineering firm came with a number of solutions, two of which are being implemented with this project. First of all, the city had a parking lot right here for their baseball fields and kind of access to the dog parks over here that was gated off from the school district's parking lot right here. And because of that, the parking lot, similar to that other parking lot, was very inefficient, a little bit awkward, probably more so on the city side, but it's still awkward. And the plan was to combine those, actually purchase this house right here and make one large parking lot here that would benefit both entities. The city had been looking at creating some parking in this space because of the dog park being so popular, and looking to some future expansions to the skate park here and adding some parking here. So this was kind of already in the plan for the city, and so the thought was combine the two projects and bring an access into this parking lot from 600 East. 600 East, if you zoomed out, is a great feed for this whole area of town here. And so we actually started inviting UDOT to these steering committee meetings. And as UDOT looked at where it would be best to put a light along Canyon Road, at first intuitively you might think, well, it might be at the end of Scenic Drive on 3rd East. But that's at the bottom of the hill, and it's shown that that's pretty. Tyler, could you get an aerial of this whole area and zoom out a little bit more? Okay, so you have a residential collector road that comes in here and it hits this 3rd East intersection. But the problem is this is a fairly steep hill here. And a lot of times if you put a signalized intersection at the bottom of a fairly steep hill, it's quite dangerous, especially in winter months. And so as UDOT and this steering committee looked at it, 600 East is actually a really good alternative for traffic to come down here and hit a signal here instead of there. Even areas right here can pretty easily access 600 East. And one nice thing about 600 East is you don't have a lot of residences, at least through this part of it. And so we worked with UDOT, they studied it out, and they actually agreed that a signal would be a lot better here instead of here, and have agreed to install that signal this summer in conjunction with our projects. What that made it possible is the Nebo School District will then bring their buses to here, and then they'll come in and they have a nice route where they can come right here, drop off all their students here on the north side of the building, loop around, come out here, go to the signal, and go to where they need to go. That brings all of the bus traffic away from the congested area in the front of the school. Right now, the buses come in here. Maybe we should switch to the other slide. So right now, the bus drop-off is right here. And what the traffic engineers were able to show is that when traffic is coming from the north, so either from this direction or that direction, coming down this road, it's most efficient for them to actually use the bus, the old bus drop-off lane to drop off their kids, then turn left and go straight out. It's 2 lanes, so that people can park along the sidewalk to drop off their kids and then pull out into the free lane to get out. Now, coming from the south, which a lot of school children live down in this area, you can do something similar here with a little bit of an adjustment to this existing parking lot. They can then come through here, drop off their kids along this sidewalk area, have 2 lanes, and the other one comes around, and then they can go south. So it separates the traffic coming from the north from the traffic coming from the south, and it modeled out really well. It really improves and adds a lot of parking for people who want to access city facilities or the school, and then the same thing here. So we're excited about this project. This is mostly being paid for by the school. This area down here is 100% being paid for by the school district. The city is sharing in the cost of improving this parking lot. It'll then be a shared parking lot, and so this is closer to a 50-50. We did the math and made it exactly right so that it was fair, but it's pretty close to 50-50 on this cost, and this is 100% school district on this side. So we're excited about both these changes for making traffic better around the junior high schools. Anyway, this agreement is to share those costs as calculated. There is a cap or a max on the cost, and this is before it's bid out. So once it's bid, if for any reasons those caps aren't in line with the bids, then we'll need to go back to the school district and true it up. But it's based more on estimates on the project.
Perfect. Thank you, Chris. Anybody have any questions for Chris about this junior high project? 2 junior high projects in the same meeting. Pretty cool. Good partnership with our counterparts at the district, and all the good work that staff does with them. If there's no questions, I'd entertain a motion.
I move we approve Resolution 20-02, authorizing the mayor to enter into an interlocal agreement with Nebo School District to realign streets and parking lots at Spanish Fork Junior High School.
Second.
Motion by Council Member Scobes, seconded by Council Member Gordon. This need to be a roll call vote. Just resolution. Okay. Roll call vote. We'll start on that end with Council Member Beck.
Aye.
Council Member Scobes.
Aye.
Council Member Mendenhall. Aye. Council Member Gordon.
Aye.
Council Member Argyle.
Aye.
That passes. Perfect. Thanks, Chris. Next one. Item C, Resolution 20-3, amending electric utility rates.
You want the memo first, actually?
No, this is fine. So what we have here is net metering customers. Looks like we probably got our first one back in 2012, and it slowly started to rise in 2014 and on. It was at this time that the city was concerned that our net metering policy might not be sustainable. And so we hired a firm to come in, a national firm with a lot of experience of this type of thing. And they came in and they looked at the rates and they said, okay, the net metering customers, which are customers that have solar panels that produce a lot of power during the day, probably more than they need, and they are able to push that power back onto the grid. And then we meter what they push onto the grid, and then at night they'll draw power from the grid, the city grid, if you will, and we have a meter on both ends of it, and then they net out how much power is used, and they get a credit for what they give to the city. One of the problems that utilities have had in the past with this is if you size your solar panels such that they produce a lot more electricity than you use, then you become a resident who pays nothing on their electric bill, which is fine except for all of the transformers and wire and conduit and poles and transmission line that is required to bring power to their home at night. That maintenance of that is not being paid for. And so it makes power rates unsustainable. And so the recommendation from the study is to choose the amount that would be paid in a base rate by all residents, and that would pay for the maintenance of the system. And then the power itself would be in the usage rate. And then net metering becomes sustainable. You basically could have everyone in the city go to net metering and the city would still be whole. And so that seemed like a great plan. We called in a lot of our existing net metering customers. We talked to the president of the Solar Panel Association, and we had kind of a steering committee on how we should proceed with this. One of the things that is good about solar panels is there's less pollution. It also takes off peak usage during the day from the city, and a lot of our costs are governed by how high do we get during the day, and if we can lower that, that helps us with our bill. And so we feel like the solar panels are good. We just need to make a sustainable system where it doesn't matter to us how many people go on to the net metering program. There's a lot of press in the news. There's a lot of press right now which says about Rocky Mountain Power trying to fix their net metering system so that it's more sustainable, and it seems like a lot of those measures that they're proposing are pretty drastic changes that could change a lot of people who are counting on some cost savings. It might really hurt them. And so one of the things that I think was good that Spanish Fork did is back here, working with all the stakeholders, I feel like we came up with a really good sustainable method that basically doesn't have any one group take advantage of any other group. And it phased it in so that people could plan with their return on investments for net metering. And so one of the things that Seth asked, can you put that back up there, Tyler?
Oh, you want that one back?
Sorry, I just want to. One of the things that Seth asked is, how did this affect net metering customers? And it seems like we had a spike in the number of customers here, and then it kind of dropped, but it's held steady for the last 3 years. But one thing that's really interesting, so far this year, we've had 28 net metering customers. So we've already exceeded how many we had last year, this year, and we're only a month and a half. So I thought that was kind of interesting. So going on, now we can switch to the other side, but basically what the recommendation was coming out of the steering committee is that we migrate to this sustainable plan over 6 years. And basically, the dollar amount was set at $23 a month per customer would cover all the maintenance costs. And so once we got to 23, then it wouldn't matter how many customers were on net metering because everyone was paying their share of what the costs were. And so the recommendation is over a period of 6 years, we do 6 zero revenue increasing rate changes, where we basically raise the base rate up this much, and at the same amount we lower the usage rate so that it's revenue neutral. The average resident in Spanish Fork's power rate would not change at all with these changes. And then all the others would just be really minute changes. And so that's what this is. This is the third rate change. And another thing that came out of those steering committee meetings is that the best time of year for these net metering customers to make these rate changes was in February. That's when they called it the solar year. Yeah, the solar year begins, and so once we make those changes every February, it helps them with the accounting of how much power gets accrued over months and months, and it gets zeroed out every February. So that's why it's being proposed now. Basically, the base rate takes another step. It was at $3.50 3 years ago. And it increases by around $3 every year, so it's another step towards that $23 mark. to $14.70. And if you'll notice, all of the usage rates, which are now tiered, drop the equivalent amount so that everyone's bills goes down by about $3. Anyway, any questions at all about that?
How many solar customers do we have?
About 200?
How many users? Total users? Do you know?
About 12,500, I think.
25, okay.
One interesting thing to note about the rates as we continue in this change of the base rate to that $23 range that Chris is talking about. That first 500, don't go away from this quite yet though. Our 0 to 500 kilowatt hours is migrating down to just about cost. And so the first 500 kilowatt hours used by our customers, when we have that higher base rate, the first 500 kilowatt hours will be just about the cost that we pay, because we're getting that true cost. It's not, there's a slight markup, but not a whole lot. And that makes it so that everybody that's paying for that system gets those first 500 kilowatts fairly inexpensively. And then those high users, say the parents' home, for example, with the different things that we do in our home, air conditioners, et cetera, we'll pay eventually a little bit more on that as we bust through the 1,000 kilowatt hours and move towards the 12, 13, 1,400 kilowatt hours. But specifically those low users like widows, single parents, and those they tend to be in that lower range, and this will actually be something that will help them as well.
So I'm looking at the actual numbers here. It's actually right, almost 200 exactly. And last year we had 29 new customers, and as of the beginning of this year, we've had 28. So one less than last year. And we're only 2 months into it. We think that some solar panel salesmen have really hit the city aggressively right now, and that's probably why.
Some good ones.
Yeah, they must know what they're doing.
Yeah.
I remember your solar president saying in those discussions as well, that doing this on the solar year gives them, their solar people, the ability to show the true cost to the customers too, and say, this is what you pay, this is what you have to pay in Spanish Fork, this is what you're going to pay for kilowatt, and true up the numbers for them so that people aren't being misled and then think something else when they make that investment. So
That was really important to us to protect our residents, and so we created a whole web page explaining all this, and it gives projected amounts of what you could count your bill to be close to going into the future, and use that in your calculations for your return on your investment if you do solar panels. And so apparently it still makes sense for a reasonable number, and it looks like, I'm guessing you have some pretty active salesmen at this time. We'll have another year like this year, so.
okay, perfect.
Motion to approve resolution number 20-03, amending electric utility rates.
Second?
Motion by Councilmember Gordon, second by Councilmember Beck. All in, roll call vote. Councilmember Scobes.
Aye.
Councilmember Mendenhall. Aye. Councilmember Gordon.
Aye.
Councilmember Argyle.
Aye.
Councilmember Beck.
Aye.
That passes. Perfect. Thanks, Chris. On to letter D, ordinance 320, prohibiting parking where curbs have been painted red.
Okay, the name is pretty self-explanatory.
Like an obvious one.
But
I thought that was always the case.
No, now it's an
Dang it,
ordinance.
I missed out on parking.
You could have been there.
Isn't that an oxymoron?
you had a chance, but that chance is over with now. This is approved. But this also accounts for where we sign. Quite often, once you paint a curb red, it's pretty permanent. So we like to just sign some streets and say no parking, and it accommodates that. Also, we have utility vehicles that this ordinance accommodates to access. If there's an electrical box right off the red curb, they can still park there, and it allows for that. So just kind of clean up ordinance.
Perfect.
So the other key thing this does is, we have areas that need to be signed as no parking. We don't have to bring that to you every time. We designate the public safety director to be able to designate those areas. And it's really an efficiency ordinance and something that doesn't burden you with those kind of matters.
Sounds great.
Give Chief a can of paint and tell him to go to work. It's his deal. There you
We
go.
prefer a post hole.
Perfect. Thank you, Junior. Thanks, Chris. Any questions?
It doesn't matter. You want to? Let's let Tyler go. He doesn't get
Sure.
Should we do this one first? I move we approve ordinance 320 prohibiting parking where curbs have been painted red.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Mendenhall, seconded by Councilmember Argyle. All in favor? Oh, sorry. Ordinance. Roll call vote. I'll start. Councilmember Mendenhall, aye. Councilman Gordon.
Aye.
Councilmember Argyle.
Aye.
Councilmember Beck.
Aye.
Councilmember Scobes.
Aye.
That passes. Thank you.
So you're gonna paint the curb here red?
That's what this represents, yeah. We've already done
The train can't stop there.
So this is a parcel of land, just to kind of get your bearings. Up here is Main Street, so we got the Public Works, actually you gotta come up a little bit more even. But the Public Works facility that's existing right now, our sewer treatment plant, and then up here we have our Public Works buildings. There's a parcel of property that Jamie Evans owns, and we're proposing that we enter into an agreement to purchase this parcel from him. It's 9.3 acres. We would pay $210,000 an acre for it. And the idea is that it would be used in the future for the public works facilities, most likely for a sewer treatment plant. Any questions about that?
So we resolved the issues that we were talking. Okay,
Yeah, yep.
great, cool.
Okay, thanks.
Do that one and the other one together?
Well, we can tell you about it individually. Or do you want to act on that one in a minute?
Let's act on it. Entertain a motion for the Jamie Evans property purchase.
Make a motion to approve the Jamie Evans property purchase.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Argyle, seconded by Councilmember Gordon. Roll call vote or just a?
Motion.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Perfect.
All right. So today, or at this moment in our meeting, we're going to talk about the Bingham Trust property. This is what we'll call the 1400 North connection between Main Street and 300 West at 1400 North. So just north of the auto dealer there, just south of the other auto dealer there on Main Street. For the longest time, we've had a road that stubs in from Main Street at 1400 South, but it only goes back to the end of their property, and we need another connection in that block. 4 years ago, the city purchased this 0.85 acres from the Bingham family and to construct this road, leaving the remaining just over 2 acres, which is normally a sufficient size of property to not create what you might call what would you call it, a nuisance property? Difficulty, and I thought that would be okay, but the challenge that has been posed to the remaining parcel is the length of the property here. So the length of the improvements assessed to this property is significantly high for this project, and we've created a significant burden on the land. And in a takings sort of setting, it's very appropriate to simply buy all of the property, and then UDOT or Spanish Fork City in this situation develops the road, and then we sell off the remaining parcel. Usually they would combine it with other parcels. We've done that in other places, for example, around Spanish Fork Parkway and Highway 51. This one just took us a little bit longer to realize we created a similar situation here as we have done in other places. So the proposal before you, and we've talked about this in closed session now, is to approve the purchase contract for the remaining 2 acres, 2.14 acres, total price of $425,000. which is just under 200,000 an acre, so it's a little bit different price than the last property, a little bit less, but in that same area and in that same ballpark. Any questions on this property?
Thank you, Seth. Any questions for this? If not, I'd entertain a motion.
I move we approve the Laura F. Bingham Trust Real Estate Purchase Agreement.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Scobes, seconded by Councilmember Beck. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes. Okay.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
Motion by Councilman Gordon to adjourn, second by Councilman Argyle. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thanks for joining us.